Today we're having a look at this, and this is the Xsoldering Pro Dual Handpiece soldering station. Now the idea with this is that you can run a T210-ish style handpiece and a T245-ish handpiece off of this at the same time. And the reason I say ish is because although the handpieces here look like JBC handpieces, they're actually a different size to the handpieces they're supposed to represent. What you've got on this station then is your two soldering iron holders, the tip changing area, the tip cleaning area, and the area for kind of wiping off your tip. It's always important to keep your tip clean. Let's have a look at the back of this. Now if we have a look on the back here, we can see that the out 1 socket has 3 pins and the out 2 socket has 5 pins. And I'm guessing that's probably just to prevent the wrong iron handle from being plugged into the wrong socket, because that would, if you plugged a 210 handle into a 245 socket on this type of machine, it would probably blow the cartridge up. It would certainly make it overheat. Let's take the shrink wrap off of here and I think get it plugged in. Very exciting. It's like Christmas. And one of the first things you kind of notice about it is how light it is. This does not have a transformer in it. This definitely has some sort of switch mode power supply in. And for the screen protector peeling aficionados, let's peel this off. Oh yeah, nice. Well, it looks very nice. Let's get the hand pieces out of their wrapping. See, I really like that connector. I think it's actually, I think it's higher quality than the JBC one actually, which is like a plastic high rose thing. Let's take this one out as well. Okay, that's interesting because they both actually look exactly the same size, but there is a difference obviously, and that is clearly designed to take a bigger tip than that one is. Now I didn't order any tips for this station because I wasn't sure of its provenance, and I just wanted to try my tips with it. So I've got a couple of tips I don't really use. They're the ones I'm going to use for testing. Okay, let's put one of my tips in this. And this is obviously the 2245 style handle. Okay, that seems to fit okay. So let's take the little wrap off of that. Okay, it's got the nice silicone cable, which is always good. Let's plug that into the back. So this is the one with lots of connections. That plugs in there. I'm guessing that then goes on there. And then we'll do the 210 style handle. And we'll put one of my 210 tips in there. Okay, that fitted quite well. And we'll plug this in the back. Can't get over how light this station is. And we'll put that on there. And I think it's time to probably plug it in now. Now I have had a little play around with this off camera, just to familiarise myself with the station and also the way the menus work. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on and we'll go through those. Okay, let's have a closer look at this display then. So up here we have the model number. We've got the total uptime there. We have the current temperature and set temperature of the C245 style handle. We have the current temperature and the set temperature of the C210 handle. And down here we have the settings for each of the individual handpieces in terms of set temperature. Now these are actually two separate set temperature areas. The one at the top, when you press the up and down button, you can change it by 1 degree increments, or if you hold it down, you can move up and down in 50-degree steps. Now you can actually change that step value in the menu, which I'll show you in a bit. And if you press this button here, you move down to the bottom set menu, and with this one you can change between 400, 300, 200 or 100 very quickly, and adjust the temperature to those. I don't think that's particularly useful, really. I mean, nobody's going to be soldering at 200 degrees, certainly not going to be soldering at 100. I always leave mine on at 350. Let's set that now. So it's literally that, and that's how you set it to 350, and then I'll probably just set and forget that. Let's have a look at the menus. So the first option is language. At the moment, obviously I've got it set to English, but if you want to set it to Chinese, you can. Second one down is how fast it takes to heat up. So this is on 5 seconds high at the moment, but you can change that to 10 seconds and 15 seconds. Next one down is the temperature step. So that was what I was showing you in the previous on the front screen. These are the steps it goes up by when you press and hold down the up and down buttons there and there. We then have maximum temperature for the station. I've set mine to 450. The minimum temperature is 100. Temperature set save, as it says, saves last set temperature basically. We have the sleep delay, that's how long it takes to go to sleep. The sleep temperature, that's the temperature it puts the tips into when it goes to sleep. And then we've got hibernation, when it shuts everything down and is in effectively standby mode at that point. We've also got security mode. I've no idea what that does. LCD brightness, sound, where you can turn the beeper on and off. The GUI set, so you've actually got 3 different types of displays you can have on it. I'll show you those in a moment. You've got the default setup, or default settings. That doesn't seem to do anything at all. And then you've got this thing that says box number 1, or box number 0 rather, which doesn't do anything either. Let's have a look at these different GUIs. So at the moment it's set to arc meter, but let's change it to digital, and then you get very similar sort of display, but with digital readouts instead of those nice kind of round ones. And then if we change it to wavetable, you actually get a representation of the heat as a changing waveform. Personally, I prefer arc meter. It's really nice, easy to read, and really neat. And one thing I have noticed is that the C210 part of this, and I've tried it with numerous tips, it's taking a little while to kind of settle down. It seems to be up at 25 degrees a lot of the time, whereas the other one is around 21, which is actually about right for this room. Don't think a few degrees here and there is going to make an awful lot of difference to kind of general use though. Let's see how fast the 245 heats up once we take it out of its holder. Straight away we hear the fan ramp up. So I mean, it's not 5 seconds, but it's not terrible. Let's put that back in. Straight away it knows it's in the holder, and I'm guessing it's going to start winding that temperature down shortly. That's interesting, it seems to be staying up at temp for a little while. It's quite interesting. Let's see how long the C210 takes to heat. Yep, and again, not too bad either. Could definitely live with that in terms of speed. Yep, you can definitely have both of them out at the same time, so that is great for desoldering surface mount components, especially things like capacitors and coils and things like that, resistors, if you don't want to use hot air. and put those back in there. And straight away the fan dips down in speed. It's interesting because it's recognising that they're back in their holders, but it's not reducing the temperature. That might be to do with a sleep delay. And one weird thing I noticed when I first booted this up was that some of the settings were set to below their kind of minimum values. So I think it was the sleep delay was set to, oh there it goes. Right, so that is sleep delay. That is set to 2 minutes. So it waits 2 minutes before it starts cooling those down. When I first got the station though, that was set to something like 12 seconds or something like that. And I bumped it up just to kind of see how high it could go. And then I could never get it back to that lower value again. It was always a minimum of 2 minutes, which is very odd. And the same thing goes to the temperature, like the maximum temperature was set to 500 degrees. And then I inched it back down to 450 and never managed to get it any higher than that again. It's almost like the EEPROM was a little bit confused and just had the wrong settings in, and then just by changing it, it's actually put the right defaults in. No idea. The problem is because I can't set it to its default settings, because the instructions don't say how to, and well, I can't work out how to. I've tried multiple button presses and all sorts, and it doesn't want to do it. I mean, you can tell this station was definitely built down to a price. The handles here, the quality of, certainly of these, the green and the blue plastic, doesn't feel anywhere near as nice as on the Jabe. And on the end here, this is coming a little bit, it's coming a little bit loose. You know, somebody hasn't cut that very well. I might have to do that myself. Now both these handles look like they're the same size as the C210 from the original JBC, and I don't mind that size of handle. If you want to bulk them up a bit, these came with the station itself, so you can just slide these little foam covers over the iron like so, and it'll be a bit more C245 like then. If anyone knows how to set this thing's defaults, please let me know. There's also something else I've discovered, and that's the screen isn't very well glued on. So you can actually, I don't know whether you can see that, you'll certainly be able to hear that. Well, that's really not very good. All it takes is a bit of glue, and clearly that's got tape of some sort on it. So I'm going to have to take that apart at some point and glue it. But you know, again, this isn't a professional's tool. You know, if you had a professional business where you were soldering every day, you would be buying JBC or Pace or, you know, a brand like that, or Weller. You wouldn't be buying this. This is for people like me, enthusiastic amateurs, and I think especially for people who work with surface mount components, because it is actually very nice to have two irons just to whip off components off of a board really quickly and easily without having to fire up your hot air rework station. Now, I'm not going to do that test that I did last time with the copper tubing, just testing, you know, how much heat I could put into it. But I think I'm going to do a real world test with an actual PCB and see what it's like at soldering. Just before I solder up this PC, I just want to do a temperature test just to see whether the irons are the temperature that they're set to. And to do that, I normally put a little blob of solder on the end of the iron and then hold it next to this thermocouple probe there. Let's do that with the 245 tip. Now that is currently set to 350C. I'm just going to wait for that to come up to temperature. Kind of close enough. So let's see what that actually reads on this. So that's a little bit high at about 360. Definitely not the end of the world. And now let's try the C210 handpiece. That's now up to temp. We'll just see if we can just add a little bit of solder on that. These ones are a little bit more tricky because they're much smaller. And that one is reading a little bit low at about 310-ish. So I don't think the PID algorithm is quite working there. That is definitely a little low. So I think given the discrepancy between the display temperature and the actual temperature, I'm going to set the C210 handle to be 400 degrees, and that should give me my 350 that I like to work at. Let's try that. Let's set it to 400. And wait for it to heat up. And let's see if it's about 350 now. Yeah, it says about 340. Yeah, so that's close enough for me. But like I say, I think there's something wrong with the PID algorithm for the C210 tip in this, because it's way out, by about 30 to 40 degrees. I don't have that problem when I put it in a JBC station. It definitely registers the correct temperature. Hopefully, again, this can be fixed in a firmware update. Okay, time to do some soldering. And what I'm going to be testing the soldering station with today is a Rombo Redux V4 ROM board. This is an add-on board designed for old 8-bit Amstrad CPC computers, and this is based on a very old design that I reverse engineered and then created a modern version of it for. Because I'm so familiar with making these boards, these are a great test of this soldering station because I know how it should kind of feel soldering all the components on. The smallest component on here is this one here, and this is actually a resistor array with 4 3.3K resistors in, and that will be soldered up over here, and I'm going to be doing that under the microscope. Because the pads are quite close together, they are a little bit fiddly to solder. And this will also give me a good chance to use my new reduction lens on my microscope. Let's get the most difficult component on the board soldered up, and we'll see what that feels like with the 210 tip. Let's get a bit of flux on there, as this will be a little bit tricky without it. Now that looks like a lot of flux under the microscope, but actually it's a tiny amount in real life. Now what I think I'm going to do is just put a little blob of solder on one corner of there. Okay, after a bit of fiddling with the microscope, I think I've got it in the right position. Let's get that soldered on. It goes on there. That looks pretty good. Let's do the other legs. We'll just turn it around this way to do that. These things are so small. That's one side on. So far that feels pretty good using the iron to do that. That's working very well indeed. Let's do the other legs, or pads. and that one's on. Let's put the other one on. That worked extremely well. Very happy with that. Just a tiny bit of solder on that pad. And we'll again solder it from the side here. There we go, that's in place. New reduction lens is much better. I can actually get whole components on it now. That's that one done. And then the other side of it. And that one is on as well. Perfect. Let's move on to the larger components. So this is a 74138. Let's get this soldered on. Sometimes I actually use the bigger tip for these ones. Let's put some flux on here. Well, let's get a 74138. I'm not going to do all of the chips on here because kind of once you've done one, they're all pretty much the same after that. And on goes the 74138. Let's place it on the pads. Make sure we get it the right way around, which in this case is that way around. And let's solder that up. First pin down, then we do the opposite pin. And I'm going to try the C245 tip now. See if I can do some drag soldering with it. Let's zoom out a little bit. Oh no, that's as far as we can zoom. And that's those soldered. And then around the other way. We're going to do exactly the same with this one, just drag solder them and kind of touch the soldering up afterwards. Just put a little bit of pressure down on that. I think it's slightly lifted up at one side. That one's not going at the end, but the others seem to be okay. And that one at the end is now done. And that's soldered on. I'm going to do the 74174 as well. And then I'm going to do some through-hole components. And I'll be using the 245 for this one. Let's grab a 174. These normally take an hour to actually build, which is why I'm not going to do all of it now. But I thought it'll also be a nice demonstration of a bit of surface mount soldering without using hot air. So that goes on there. So sides are secured. We'll just flip this round. And we'll do the same on the other sides. There we go. And we're just doing that with a little bit of the solder left on that tip. And those are actually all soldered. Let's flip this round and do the other side. If I can find it. There we go. We'll put just a little bit of solder on it. Another thing I've noticed is that the cartridge sticks out further by about 1.5 centimeters from this handle, but it hasn't affected my ability to use it. It feels fine. And that's soldered. Love drag soldering, it's awesome. Now we've done a couple of surface mount components, including those pesky resistor arrays, let's put some dip sockets in there. And if we just do the one up here, I think, let's put that in there, flip it over. The fun thing is getting it to stay in while you flip it over. And I'm going to zoom down on this in a second. And we're going to do one over in the corner there. Just push it down a little bit there. And then we're going to do another one over in this corner here. Just put a little bit more solder on that. Excellent. Now, because my eyesight is crap, I'm going to have to grab my magnifiers and do the rest. In fact, I'm going to turn it around just a little bit to do this. It'll make it easier for me. Unfortunately, I've got nothing I can put this in to hold it. So we just have to, just hold it down while I'm soldering it. Going very nicely so far. Do the last two on this side. Okay, so that's one side done. Let's do the other side. going to put something underneath this just to keep it, just to raise it up a little bit. I don't know what yet. Oh, a couple more ROM boards maybe, that'll do. There we go, I put a couple of ROM boards underneath it just to keep it up a little bit. They're soldering very nicely. It certainly feels like the Jabe. It's just that little bit longer because of how far that tip sticks out of the handle. Okay, that's all those done. So I've used the C210 tip and the C245 tip, and that's actually worked really well. It looks messy on camera, but once it's gone in an ultrasonic cleaner and had a good old brush up, that will look amazing. Now we've done some surface mount soldering and some through-hole soldering, might be worth just doing a little bit of desoldering. And now we're going to use the dual soldering irons just to take a couple of components off this board without using hot air. Go ahead and do that now. Wait for them to heat up. So the first thing we're going to attack is this inductor. And that's that off. What about a... Whoa, there's loads of resistors. How about a resistor? And that's off. Another resistor, that's off. How about a capacitor? There's one just there we can have. And here we hit one of the bugs of this station where every so often it will pop up and say that a tip is bad. I'm going to take a picture of that to show you. And as soon as we switch it off and then back on again, the handpieces come back to life. Now I have seen that happen a couple of times on the 245 handle when the station goes completely into hibernation. Again, rebooting it fixes it, but it's a bit bloody annoying. That's the first time I've seen it on the 210 handle though. That's the sort of thing that could be fixed with a firmware update, but I've no idea whether this thing can take firmware updates at all. Hopefully it can. Straighten that up, there we go. Right, let's try it now that the irons are working again. That should just come right off. Like that. Nice and easy. It's a very nice way just to take these sort of components off. Without using hot air. You really normally only want to do this with dead components, of course, because they're going to get quite hot quite quickly, and a lot of the time they'll stick on the end of the tip. But yeah, that works really well, apart from the odd tip detection problem. And that issue with the tips disconnecting every so often is one of the reasons I would not recommend this for a professional business. If you're a hobbyist, you can probably live with that, but if you're trying to use these things all day, every day, nah. Let's go ahead and desolder this and see how well that comes out. Sometimes I find it pays just to add a little bit of leaded solder onto there just to help the lead-free solder be solder sucked out properly. I know that may seem counterintuitive, but there we go. Put a little bit on there. And on there. Flows nice and quickly. Let's turn this around. Now I'm using one of these engineer solder suckers, and this thing is bloody brilliant. Easily the best solder sucker I've ever owned. See if we could just take that first one out then. Hopefully it won't wobble too much when we try and do this. It does get filled with solder very quickly though, but that's the price you pay. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Let's see if we can wiggle that out. Yep, it's definitely wiggling. Might just need to lever that out with something. The dental pick comes in handy again. So we should just be able to lever that straight out of here. And there it is. Desoldering. Let's put that back in again now, because I do want to reuse this power supply. So that is the end with the cutout. That goes in there. I'll just put that in there. That should hopefully hold itself in. And then we'll just solder those legs up again. One. Perfect. Okay, so we've done surface mount soldering, surface mount desoldering, through-hole soldering, through-hole desoldering. And of course the surface mount desoldering was with 2 irons, just to show you can use them at the same time. Okay, I think it's time for my summary. So here are the bad points. The firmware is flaky, hasn't been tested enough, especially where it reports the tips as being faulty. Because a reboot seems to fix that, hopefully a firmware update will sort that out for good. That's of course if this device can have a firmware update. It does have a micro USB port, and when I plugged that in, it showed up as an iAdapter Smart Kit. I've no idea what that is, but hopefully it will provide a firmware update path. The handles aren't exact JBC copies and feel cheap, which of course they are. However, the plug is better quality, being metal instead of plastic. The tip for the C245 handle sticks out at the back, so it's actually possible to burn yourself accidentally if you reach around to something behind it. The screen plastic should have been glued down better. It's just a little thing that just makes it look more crappy than it actually is. And now for the good points. It's great value for money. It's a dual handle soldering station for less than 150 quid, or a little bit more if you need tips with it. Soldering and desoldering surface mount and through hole works great with both handpieces, and really this is what the soldering station is all about. The user interface is actually pretty good, with clear menus and informational displays. It's quite lightweight, but that's a preference thing. I quite like it, but some people might prefer the weight of the JBC or JABE stations. So in summary, a great value soldering station, but not really suitable for professional work environments where it's going to be used all day every day. However, for a hobbyist or enthusiastic amateur, I think it's a pretty good bit of kit. I'll be using this as my daily driver for a few months, and I'll let you know how it goes in a future video. If you would like me to do a teardown of this soldering station, please leave a comment below. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to my channel if you're not already subscribed. Obviously, if you are already subscribed, you can't really subscribe twice, but if you could, that'd be great. Thank you for watching this video. Goodbye.